Thanks for joining me again. I'm Dickson, and today we're going to be continuing our conversation about mapping and interpretation. We've pretty much established over the last few weeks that the most important thing that we could do in order to ensure our fishing success is to get really good at this area of mapping and interpretation. And then we talked about how the interpretation of a fishing situation takes in a whole bunch of different things. It's not just looking at a contour map and picking out a little spot where you're going to go fish. It involves a whole bunch of other things. The last time we talked, we included some discussion on the seasonal patterns, the seasonal movements of a fish. What are we looking for? Pre-spawns, towards the spawn and the post-spawn, late fall. We're looking at the steeper banks. During the spawn, we're back in the feeder stream cuts, all the way back into the very head of those cuts, looking for our spawning fish. And then the bulk of the season, we were over to the more gradual sloping side of the reservoir, and where we have the longer structures. And this is where the bulk of the season you're going to be finding your fish. So we established a bunch in our little discussion the last time we talked, and we used a section of a flatland reservoir, a deep flatland, and it tells a lot of the stories that we want to tell when it comes to interpreting a map. Now, we're going to switch a little bit, and we're going to go to a natural lake. Today, we're going to take a look at this little sample map that I have, and it's one that I used to teach when I was teaching Buck Perry schools. It's a very simple map, but it tells a lot of what I want to tell you today. A lot can be garnered from this, but it really sets us up to be able to evaluate or interpret what we're seeing on a contour map as we enter into this little discussion today. Keep in mind that if for some of you, for some of my past students, this seems, I'm sure, somewhat elementary, but I have to make sure that we all on the same page and we end up in the right place when it comes to being able to interpret a fishing situation. Now, we've already discussed about all of the great tools that we have today. We have through all of the modern technology the ability, like through Navionics and some of the other systems that are out there, we have the ability to call up a contour map of any lake of any significance anywhere in the country. It's important to know right now, if we have all of this ability through the Navionics and the ability to pull up all of these wonderful contour maps so that we can cut down our work time out there on the lake and arrive at the fish in the quickest amount of time, it's terrific having this tool. However, if you're looking at a contour map and you're seeing what you see, but you can't evaluate what it means, you can't interpret what it's telling you, it's useless. It's just rendered absolutely useless. It's of no value. So we have to get to a point, folks, we've got to get to this point where we look at a contour map, we know what we're seeing. We can evaluate what we see. And I can promise you, if you really study a section of a lake or the entire lake, you put a study on it, and you sit back and you have the ability to evaluate what you're seeing, I'm telling you, you can go to the most difficult, the most complicated natural lake there is, as long as you're grounded in this information I'm going to give you today. You'll be able to come up with the answers, and that's the whole idea. I want you to be able to see what that map is telling you, how to evaluate and interpret what it's telling you. So that's the object today. Let's get started. First off, let me review just for a moment. What did we discuss over the last couple of weeks? We discussed this. As you're looking at a map, what are you really looking for? There's three main ingredients that we discussed the last time we talked. First thing I'm looking for is deep water. In a reservoir, that's the channels. We got the main river channel. We have side feeder stream cuts, the channels that are coming out of these side feeder streams. These are the deep water sections where all migration begins from. This is the home of the fish. Now, in a natural lake, I'm looking for the deep hole, or the deep holes. So we're looking for the deep water. That's first. It's the home of the fish. Now, once we've established our deep water sections in a lake or a reservoir, the next thing we're looking for is structure. Now, we've already talked about what type of structure do we find in natural lakes. We find bars, narrow ridge-like bars, three-sided bars. We find underwater humps, underwater islands or humps, and we also have saddles. Now, normally, these saddles are occurring somewhere in deep water. You have two deep water holes, and that area in between those two holes creates what we refer to as a saddle, and it's really defined as an underwater hump that has deep water only on two sides as opposed to all four sides like a typical hump. And for certain species, for certain weather and water conditions, these deep humps or saddles are terrific structures. They're just terrific. And I've told you probably 100 times already about the beautiful saddle that I had in my summer schools in the Winnipeg River. And I'm going to be showing you an avionics picture of all of that and show you a detail map of it as we get along further along in our study when we're talking about detail mapping. However, saddle, deep water hump that has deep water only on two sides as opposed to four sides. Now, very important structures. So in a natural lake, we have three possibilities. That's it. We have bars, humps, and saddles. So as we approach a contour map of a natural lake, we know what we're looking for. First, we're looking for the deep holes. And then secondarily in a natural lake, I'll just tell you in the order, and I'm going to give you this order of how we should proceed in taking a look at or evaluating a contour map of a natural lake. First, the first thing I do is establish my deep water hole or holes. There's my fish. I got to find the fish first. Then I'm looking for structure, but the first ones I look for in a natural lake, just being honest with you, the very first ones I look for are humps because they're easily discernible on a contour map. In case you're not aware, a hump is shown as an enclosed circle. We're going to show you one today. And most always there'll be a depth mark in the middle of that enclosed circle. In the case of the one we're showing today, it's 5 feet. So it's telling us we have a hump that crowns at 5 feet. They'll show the shallowest spot. Now, all humps won't produce. We talked about it. Some of them are dead ends. Some of them don't, don't lead to, not only don't lead to the shallows, but don't lead to deep water. We have shallow humps that don't lead to deep water. And in order to find out whether or not they're going to produce, just by looking at a contour map, sometimes we can't. But we're going to identify where they are. And then when we get out on the water and doing our detail work, we're going to check pretty much all humps. But anytime there's a question mark, if I identify where my humps are, I'm going to check most all of them out for sure because they're fantastic structures. And one of the reasons I said in our study on structure, one of the reasons that a hump is such a great structure, it has 4 possibilities of a migration route. We got deep water on all 4 sides. So all other things being equal, humps are great structures. So as I get back to what am I looking for on my map, I'm looking for deep water. Next, I'm looking, do I have any humps? After that, I'm looking for my next most important structure in a natural lake, and that is my narrow, ridge-like, 3-sided bars. Where are my bars? Go all around the lake, and I locate all my bars. So now I found my deep water. I found all my potentially productive structures. And now what's the third thing I'm looking for? I made a big deal about this not too long ago. I think it was last time we talked or the time before. I said we're looking for break lines. When contour lines come close together, closer they come, that denotes a more rapid increase in depth and it creates this break or this break line. If these 2 contour lines come close together and run for a distance, that's what we refer to as a break line. Very important. So we're looking, we got deep water, we got structure, now I'm looking for break lines. And to take it a step further on those break lines, if we have really a detailed map that we can see, I want to find break lines in that lake that are breaking somewhere between 12 and 20 feet. 15 to 20 I like even better. But 12 to 20 qualifies that I'm going to pay attention, take a look. It's going to be important to me. And then definitely the last time we talked, I mentioned that another really important thing that I'm looking for is where we have that sudden increase in depth. Contour lines come close together and it breaks, but it only comes close together in one spot, and then those contour lines fan back out again. So my break line is only occurring in one spot. Now, Buck referred to that as a break, and more specifically, we refer to it as a sharper break. Now, when we're taking a look at this map, sharper breaks and break lines, these are areas that we're looking for on the map that we really have to pay special attention to. We have to emphasize these two things, sharper breaks, break lines. And why is that? You might ask, why is that? I can tell you. It's because that's where you and I are going to run into the fish. So as we take a look at our study map for today, natural lake, and it's in 5-foot contours. And you see we have marked some areas that are going to get our attention. Keep in mind now, when we're looking at a contour map, deep water, structure, break line. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so as we look at this map, as we take our first look, just taking a general look of it, and then we mark down some areas of interest that we're going to discuss. And we marked it with the letter A. We see a narrow ridge-like formation, a bar reaching out from a shoreline towards deep water. And then B, we have a rather flat-ish looking area. And over there at C, we have a bay that sort of has this eroded kind of depression in it, but again looks relatively flat. And then you go around to letter D, and just looking at it in a matter of a second or two, you automatically thinking, well, this is the best structure in the lake, but we'll talk about it later. But then we go around to letter E, and you'll see that we have the contour lines come pretty close together going around that bay. This denotes a steeper bank, deeper water going back into this bay. And then as you come out of that bay, you'll see the letter F. Here we have another bar, another structure. You can't miss it. And a lot of times, just looking at the shoreline, you'll be able to tell where these features are. The shoreline will give it away on a natural lake, pretty much. If the shoreline doesn't do it, the weed line will. But at any rate, we found another bar at letter F. Is it any good or not? These are details we're going to come up with later. But we're going to make some interpretations just off of what we're seeing at the moment. Now, we leave F. We go over to G. Here again we have a relatively steep bay, steep banks going back into this bay. And if we break this lake down, we just say A, B, C, D, E, F, G. These are the areas of this lake that we have to evaluate. And that's the idea, that's the beauty of the contour map. We can do this evaluation pretty quick. It's not going to take very long. Now, let's take another look at our map. Now, I want you to sort of try to develop this study pattern when you're looking at a map. Don't just look at it real quick and say, boy, that bar looks good, and then go fishing. No. I want to evaluate this whole lake. And it doesn't take very long to do it. As we approach a contour map of a natural lake, we know what we're looking for. First, we're looking for the deep holes. And then secondarily in a natural lake, I'll just tell you in the order, and I'm going to give you this order of how we should proceed in taking a look at or evaluating a contour map of a natural lake. First, the first thing I do is establish my deep water hole or holes. There's my fish. I got to find the fish first. Two, second thing I always do, I look for humps, any underwater islands. They're such great structures. I got to find in my natural lake, do I have any humps? Well, in this case, we have one. But since we only have one deep water hole, I don't have any saddles. So I only have one hump, no saddles. So the next thing I'm looking for is ridge-like bars that reach out from the shoreline towards deep water. Now, as you can see, we have discovered we have 3 bars in this lake. One at letter D, one at letter A, one at letter D, and then one over there at letter F. So we have 3 bars that we've identified. Now, the 4th thing, and this is important, this is something that I do just automatically. I don't even think about it, but when I'm looking, the next thing I'm looking at is, do I have any flat areas that exist between any one of these structures that I just pinpointed and deep water? Are there flats that are surrounding, or do my shoreline bars lead to a flat? This is important that you notice this, because as you know, fish won't cross a flat. So now, in order of importance, what I have, deep water, where is it? Okay, are there any humps, underwater islands? 3, where are my bars? Discovered that. 4, are there any flats that these bars lead to that does not seemingly reach to the deep water? Now 5, I at this point want to study my map carefully, very carefully, to see if I can establish any breaks or break lines anywhere on my structures. As you can see on letter A, there are 2 distinct breaks. 2, not 1, but 2 sharper breaks. It's not a break line, it only occurs in one spot. And then the next deeper break, it breaks again a sharper break. So I have 2 sharper breaks occurring at letter A. Then I go around to letter D. There's another sharper break occurring. If you're on the shoreline looking out into the lake, on the left-hand side of that bar, you'll see a very distinct finger on the left-hand side of the bar. We have a break line running around that bar, but we also have it breaking off the end, but we also have a finger that reaches out and creates a sharper break to the deepest water in the lake. Now, just at first glance, that's where I'm going. I'm going to do some detail. I'm going to evaluate the rest of this lake, but that appears to be the spot, and it appears to be a spot I can identify just looking at the map. When I told a story about a month ago about an old friend, Danny Carpenter, and I, when we went out on Sam Rayburn, we had a spot look like that. I said, that's where we got to go anchored down and fish. We caught 100 fish. That was a spot just like that, which we could identify on the map. Now, that being said, I've got 3 breaks. I've got a break line 15 feet around D. I've got a few sharper breaks, 2 at letter A and 1 at letter D. And so I've done my homework now. I found my deep water. I established a hump. I established 3 bars. I also established, in one case in particular, the bar just leads to like a 20-foot flat, which concerns me. And then, lastly, we studied that map intently, and we discovered 3 sharper breaks occurring. The one on letter D, and the other 2 on the bar at A. So we've got a lot of information already, just in a matter of seconds. That's all it took. Now, all that being said, let's get back to what I'm trying to establish with you. I want you to be able to look at a map and get answers. I want you to get a bunch of answers. Not necessarily exactly where am I going to throw my cast tomorrow morning when I go out there. Maybe not that. But I want you to have a picture of this lake that we're looking at, our study lake. So I'm going to go around the lake right now, starting at letter A. And we're going to evaluate what we see. So now you have a mental picture of what this lake looks like. And now we're going to get down to what I suggested when we started today. We're going to evaluate what it is we see. We're going to interpret what we see. And if we can't do that, if we don't know how to do that, all of that information that we're just looking at is useless. We have to be able to interpret what we're looking at. So, that being said, I'm going to run around this lake. We're going to start at A. How do I perceive A? And I want you to be asking yourself these questions as we go. and see how close to right you are. Even some of you most experienced guys. I want you to like really think about this now. But before I give you the exact take on each one of these A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I want to remind you that Buck used to talk. I don't talk so much about it anymore, but it is how I go about my fishing, and I should talk about it more. But Buck always broke a lake down into two. He said I have two different kinds of water. I have trolling water and I got fishing water. That's how he used to describe it. The fishing water is where we know we got to shoot the works, spend a lot of time. Trolling water is just on the way there, just in case. There's something there that we can't see on a contour map. So, with that being said, let's look at letter A. We're going to start with letter A. As we look at letter A, we see two distinct sharper breaks. Remember, I told you, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for those sharper breaks. We love those sharper breaks. But these two breaks, one's occurring at 5 feet, the other one's occurring at 10 feet, shallow. There are sharper breaks. We've identified them, but they're breaking shallow. And it breaks into 20 feet of water, and I don't see any breaks or break lines that are showing in this 20 feet. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, wait a minute. Maybe that 20 feet's the deepest water in that area of the lake. Well, could be. But how do the fish get from somewhere out there in that 20 feet to that bar? They can't see it. Fish won't cross a flat. Now, if I had to designate trolling water or fishing water, I'd say fishing water. I'm going to go check it out. For all I know, there is a fence road down there, an old fence road. There's something that's leading those fish from a deep water, from a 20-foot spot up to that bar, even if it would produce, which I have my serious doubts, but even if it would, it's breaking so shallow that I'd have to have nearly a perfect weather condition to get the fish up there. So I could designate it as fishing water, something to look at, but I'm not too happy with letter A. I don't think there's much going to be happening at letter A. Okay, let's go to B. Letter B, you can see those contour lines are way far apart. It's nothing but a big flat. There's nothing there. There's nothing to call our attention to that area of the lake. So we're going to discard that from our thinking. Now, as you go around to letter C, you have this sort of eroded kind of deeper section going back into this bay, but it's rather flat. Okay, let's move to letter D. Now, here we have a beautiful bar running out, and it appears as though we can identify a break line that's on both sides of the bar and also breaking off the end of the bar, and it's at 15 feet. So this qualifies. Remember I said we're looking for break lines between 12 and 20. So one at 15 definitely qualifies. So now, as you're looking at that bar, let's look at it from the shoreline looking out into the lake. On the left-hand side of that break line, you're going out there, there's a distinct finger. Goes out and breaks off the end, but it also has this distinct finger, and there's a sharper break happening that it's breaking right off of that finger into the deepest water in the lake. Now, this is the spot that you would get married to. You just go out there, anchor down, start throwing fan casts in that spot. You find your fish. Of course, you'd fish the whole break line, you know. But when you're looking at just from what we can see on this map, and evaluating where we want to go fishing tomorrow morning, that's the spot, for sure. Now, if we leave letter D and swing around to letter E there, you'll see those contour lines come pretty close together in there, denoting a steeper, it's a bay area, but there's steep and deep water back in there. So from a seasonal standpoint, so let's say I have bass all over letter D. Where my pre-spawn, my late fall, where are those fish going to be? If I'm looking for a steeper bank, there it is, at letter E. So it's a spot that I'd have to fish. I'm interpreting that spot, but it's strictly a seasonal situation. And then you come around to letter F. We have another distinct bar reaching out there. Now, we can't identify a whole lot there. However, at letter F, it leads pretty close to that deep water area. The deep water swings pretty close to letter F. So as I look at that bar, my thought would be, I can't tell for sure what I'm looking at, but I'm thinking this is the second best spot in the lake. I think because the deep water swings as close as it does to that formation, to that structure, I'm expecting to find, going out there and doing some detail, I'm expecting to find some breaks and break lines leading those fish. And it would be what I would think, just from what I'm looking at, this would be the second best spot in the lake, bulk of the season. So I have letter D number 1 and letter F is number 2 spot. I still have to go do my detail. But then I come around to letter G, another steep bank, and if I have fish up there, depending on how the fish might move on that bar at F, I could have seasonal fish in G, in this steeper bank, cove back in there, letter G, I could have some spawning fish, some pre-spawn spawning fish. And late fall, I could have some fish back in there. So I would check it. But as I break down the lake, A, it's fishing water, but I'm not too thrilled with it. Doesn't lead. B, I have no interest whatsoever. Trolling water. C, trolling water. Seasonal. D, that's the spot. You shoot the works. That's where you're casting, trolling, everything that you can do, you're doing right there on that structure. That's the number 1 structure in the lake. Seasonally, E would have fish. Steep bank, pre-spawn, late fall. And around F, my second best structure in the lake. I've evaluated that lake, and I hope you have too. It gives us an idea of what we need to do. If we're going out on that lake tomorrow, depending on where the launch ramp is, you know where you're going. You know what you're doing. And let's just say that tomorrow you're going out there, but it's late fall. We've got to turn over in the lake, and we've got a lot of shallow fish. As Buck said, that's one of the times of the year, some of the best fishing in the fall, because you got big fish coming shallow. Because the lake's turning over, same temperature of water top to bottom, the angle of the sun to the earth is less direct, and you get a lot of shallow movement. So I might, if it was late October up north, I might be fishing back in some of those areas that I've interpreted from a seasonal standpoint. But bulk of the season, D is number 1, F is number 2. Okay, that leaves one thing that we haven't talked about. How about that hump? Remember I told you, I love humps. Buck loved humps. And you should too. Always identifying the humps. But in this case, we've got a hump that crowns shallow, and there's a chance that that 20-foot water in that area of the lake is the deepest water in that area and could qualify, could have some fish, but how would they get to the hump? I don't see any break lines. I don't see any breaks. I don't see anything that would lead the fish. Now there's a chance that you'd have fish at letter D. In that 25-foot, there could be some breaks that would lead them up towards that hump, and under great weather, you might have some fish on that hump. However, I would have to establish some breaks and break lines that are not showing on the map for that hump to produce. It just doesn't look like it will. However, all humps, as I said before, when I identified the structure in a lake, when I said there is a hump, I'm going to go check it out. I'm going to do a detail. And the detail might show that the hump does produce. And we're catching a lot of fish when nobody else is even anywhere close to it. So, yeah, I'm going to fish it, but I don't hold out much hope from what I can see. But the most important thing of this whole exercise is that you now say, okay, first thing I'm going to look for is my deep water. Where is it? Then I'm going to identify any humps in my natural lake. Secondarily, are there any saddles? When I'm looking at humps, I'm also concerned about a saddle. If only one deep hole, there's no saddle. Okay, so next, what am I going to do? I'm going to look for my narrow ridge-like bars that are reaching out from the shore towards deep water. And then in my procedures, the fourth thing I'm going to look at is do these bars that I've identified, and I don't care if there's 3 like there is here in this map, or if there's 30, do they lead all the way to the deepest water in the lake, deepest water in the area of the lake? the deepest water available? Do they lead? Can fish identify it and get to it? Once I've got that information, I go to number 5. Okay, I've identified all my structures. I don't care if there's 3 or there's 30. I don't care. I've identified my structures. I'm putting a careful study on my contour map. I'm now looking for breaks and break lines on or connected to those structures. If I see a sharper break, you know how I love that. That's my neon sign. Boy, we love those sharper breaks. Break lines. I can establish out of my 30 structures, I might find they all have a really great break line at 10 feet. That's not good. But 8 of them have a secondary break line that's breaking at 22 feet into the deep water. Woo! See, and so now I start pinning it down a little bit. But I want to study that map really carefully in these areas of structure and try to identify break lines. Break lines and or sharper breaks. As I mentioned to you before, this is an area that we need to emphasize in our search. Breaks and break lines. If we can see them on the map, and they're somewhere between 12 and 20 feet, we're in business. We're in business. So that's my procedure. That's how I look at a natural lake map. Deep water, humps, bars. Do the structures lead all the way to the deepest water? Or do they just lead to a flat, long areas of flat? 5. Discover, after careful study, all the breaks and the break lines that are on or connected to the structures that you've identified. And now, you've gotten something. You've gotten your money's worth from that lake map. It's told you a whole bunch of things. We know exactly when we launch the boat tomorrow where we're going, what we're going to do, and what we're looking for, and what we already know is there. It's terrific. Like I said, if you know how to evaluate or interpret a map, it's going to teach you all about your lake. It's going to put you at the spots where the fish are. At the very least, if you do a good job interpreting a contour map, you do a good job. At the very least, you're going to be out there in the right spot to do a detail map and start casting to the spot and catching the school of big fish. At the very least. In some cases, you'll be able to identify the actual spot on the contour map, like Danny and I did down at Lake Sam Rayburn. Sometimes it's that easy. Keep in mind, the average fisherman, they don't know how to evaluate what they're looking at. They see all these lines, but they really haven't figured it all out yet. And that's the reason I went to this very simple map. But now what I'd like you to do, I'm going to throw up a couple of maps on Navionics. And I'm going to ask you to study them. And see if what we talked about today doesn't help put you in the right spot in these 2 absolute real lakes. And there's 2 lakes that I mapped with a group of fishermen from Minneapolis years ago. One is called White Bear Lake. And the other one, which was close to it, is Bald Eagle Lake. And I had 4 boats. We went out there with some students and mapped both of those lakes. We took one day and mapped the whole thing. And in the process, we caught somewhere around 75, 80, 90 fish both days. At the same time, we put those lakes away. We did a complete map of them. So after what we studied today, I want you to look at those 2 lakes. Just look at them and study them and see if you can't help pinpoint a little bit better than you could before as to where the business is on those 2 lakes. So, till the next time, be sure to follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our channel. I don't want you to miss any of the discussions we're having on mapping interpretation, because I know what it can do for your fishing. It'll change your fishing life. I promise it will. So till the next time, thanks for being with me, and we'll see you.